It's so easy to make the figure feel flat, like it's not three-dimensional. Why is that? Because the drawing surface is flat. The drawing is two-dimensional. And so every time we're trying to create a drawing that has depth to it, that has a third dimension, it's always a magic trick. It's always an illusion because the paper or the screen or whatever you're drawing on is 2D, and we have to create the illusion of that third dimension. And so just like a good magician, you got to sell that illusion. So I've got this really big disadvantage when it comes to learning to draw. It just messes things up all the time. You may have this problem too. I have a human brain in here, and everything, it just keeps distorting everything I'm doing, messing everything up. And this is one of the ways, is flattening everything, because it doesn't like foreshortened human body parts. It really doesn't like it. So it wants an arm, for example, to look like this flat shape. It doesn't like the idea of an arm receding in space and changing into this kind of shape or coming towards the camera or something like that. And I've seen so many beginner drawings at this point, probably thousands, and I've seen all the different ways that people's brains distort foreshortened forms. It happens in so many ways and you may not realize it. But the cool thing is that our brains are not so resistant when it comes to simpler forms like boxes and cylinders, right? Another great thing about these simpler forms is they are a really clear, easy way to create that illusion of depth on the 2D surface. Like a box is really just the easiest, clearest way to show 3D. It's 3 planes, the 3 dimensions right there. And a cylinder is also an easy, simple way to create that sense of depth. So what we have to do is try to draw parts of the figure in terms of these simple forms, which sounds easy, but is actually often quite tricky. But I'm gonna give you a really easy way to get into this. So firstly, what forms should you use for the different parts of the figure? There's lots of different approaches to this. The one that I like to use is really simple and practical. I don't force anything into a form, a simple box or a simple cylinder, when it just doesn't really look like that at all, and it's like forcing it, you know? I only do it when it seems to naturally be that way. So what do I mean? I mean, like, the wrist really is naturally a very boxy form. It just has 4 simple planes to it. That makes a lot of sense. The upper arm is very often a basically cylindrical form, and the upper forearm too, so it really kind of works, right? Where it doesn't work, in my opinion, is places like on the shoulder, right? Sometimes you could see it as a sphere or a box or something. To me, most of the time, that doesn't really work. So I don't try to force the shoulder into one of those primitive shapes like a box or a cylinder or a sphere. I just try and simplify it, but keep the form roughly as it is. To learn about the simple forms you can see in the figure, how to find them, check out our Fresh Eyes Challenge. I've linked it below, but also I'll link the tutorial specifically about the simple forms. I recommend doing the whole challenge if you haven't already. It's free at the moment. Now, I mentioned earlier, this whole thing is an illusion, and you're the magician, right? You're selling this trick. And so we can't have marks and stuff that go against the illusion. Everything needs to go with it. So here's what I mean. Like, let's say I have a box and I put some marks on it, like it's got dirt or something on it. And those marks don't really go with the form. Suddenly the box starts to get flattened out, right? If I make sure that all my marks are going with those ideas, those 3 simple planes, now it really helps to sell the illusion. Same with a cylinder. If I have a shadow cast across the cylinder, it needs to be wrapping around that cylinder. If I have, you know, some writing on it or something, I want to show it wrapping. Everything is going to sell that illusion of that form. And that is also going to be the case when you're drawing your figure in terms of these simple forms. Like if you've got a hand and it's going away from you, you're going to want, you know, if you're going to put the nails on, the nails need to wrap around that form. If you're going to add some wrinkles at the knuckles, they need to wrap around that form. If you're painting it, why not use brush strokes that wrap around that form? When you have a shadow, see if you can get that edge of that shadow to show that form as well. Show the simple planes. If it's a boxy plane, sell the simple form idea in your shading, in your mark making, in everything. We want it every time we're doing this, it's a magic trick. You got to remember that. It's a 2D surface and you want them to feel it's 3D. So that means you've got to sell it with everything you've got. Overlaps are simple, relatively easy to use, and incredibly powerful. Underrated in my opinion. All I mean is one form is behind the other one, like this hand is behind this one from your point of view, right? It creates depth because when you see one thing is behind another, you naturally think of depth. And so having forms that overlap each other is a really, really good way for us to help sell that illusion. When you're setting up a still life to draw, don't have all the objects all separated, right? Have them overlapping each other. It's good for the composition, it's good for big simple shapes of value and stuff like that, but it's also good for creating depth and dimension. And when you're drawing a figure, you gotta think about the overlaps in the forms, especially when things are foreshortened. When an arm's coming towards you, you can see that simple idea in the hand, overlapping the simple forms in the forearm, overlapping the simple forms in the upper arm. That is gonna help you to create depth just by visualizing that and bringing those ideas out. What's really funny is, again, these brains are gonna try and undo that. Our brains really want all the forms to be separated, have their own little space, and things can easily get stretched out that way or pushed across to the side. If you're seeing a shoulder, shoulders foreshortened, so that the far shoulder is a bit hidden behind the torso, it's really common to draw that shoulder like it's separated or try and stretch it out so we can separate it from the torso, have some daylight between them. Get used to emphasizing and bringing out overlaps. It's a great tool. So the principles of perspective are going to apply to our drawings, and that's going to help give them depth and make them feel real, breathe life into them. But the normal way that we kind of study perspective, where we think about vanishing points and lines nicely converging to them, isn't going to apply that much, because that happens when lines are parallel to each other. It works great in a street scene or in a room or whatever, but most of the lines and edges and things we're dealing with on these simple forms in the figure, because we're using these more organic forms, they're not really parallel. And so they're not going to converge nicely to vanishing points that you set or whatever. There's a couple of lines on the figure that might be parallel, but generally this is the case. So instead of thinking in these more kind of formal perspective technique terms, we are just going to think of this really simply. The stuff that's further away is smaller than it would be if it was close, and the stuff that is close is going to be bigger than it would be if it was further away. So like an arm, it tapers, right? It's wider at the shoulder, bigger, chunkier at the shoulder and the upper arm, and narrower at the wrist. So overall, it's this tapering down shape. If it's going away from us in space, like because of perspective, the wrist is going to be even smaller because it's further away, and the tapering is going to be even stronger. So that's it. That's as simple as that. Like the stuff that's further away is going to appear smaller than it would have. The stuff that's closer is going to appear bigger than it would have. Your brain is going to try to undo that. So if it's foreshortened, it's going to try and draw the far away stuff big. It's going to try and draw the close stuff small. You can resist that if you need to measure things to really make sure you're making things small enough or big enough or whatever. You can do that. Another little thing you could do is exaggerate the effect of perspective. So, things get smaller as they go away. You could make them extra small, and you can make stuff that's close a little bit extra big to really sell the illusion like we talked about earlier. Okay, so sometimes it feels like there's this huge pile of skills you need to learn, and it's like, oh, well, here's another one to just add on to the pile. How does it fit in with everything else? Why is there so many things to learn? Well, ultimately, hopefully this will make it simpler, right? Ultimately, everything's coming down to three fundamental skills. One is gesture, one is values, right? The shapes of light and dark, and then one is forms, like we're talking about in this video. And really, when we're studying anatomy, it's just a more kind of detailed and broken up version of the same thing. So you could see the upper arm in terms of the humerus bone with the bicep and the brachialis and the tricep, but you can also summarize all of that into one form, which would be that simple cylindrical shape. So it's just the same ideas, but looked at a simpler level. And so how does this fit into your actual drawing process? Like when you're doing a drawing, how do you use these ideas? So there's two ways that I would go about this. One, I would start drawing figures in terms of these simple forms as an exercise. But that doesn't mean this is like a step-by-step how to draw figures method. When you're doing your actual figure drawings, which you want just to look great, you're gonna have this toolbox, right? And you've been doing some gesture practice, maybe you've been doing some values practice, and then you've been doing some anatomical stuff, and then you've been doing some of these simple forms. And each time you do those exercises, you're putting more tools in your toolbox. And then now when you're coming to do the actual figure drawing, you're gonna pull out different tools when they're gonna help you. So you gotta keep in mind that all this stuff is not there like you have to do this, this is the rules, like these are all just things that are there to help you. So you should only use them when you're like, oh, that's really gonna help me out right now to put a box here for the wrist. That's gonna help me because foreshortening is hard, and this drawing that as a simple cylinder is really gonna help me deal with it. Because it really does, it really makes foreshortened stuff way easier, for example. I mentioned earlier that we have a full tutorial in our Fresh Eyes Challenge about the simple forms to use for the whole figure, and that is on the screen, so go and check that out and I'll see you over there.